You probably have a favorite pair of jeans at home. Probably a little frayed around the cuffs, but you never wash them because you love that broken-in feel. I suspect that you have a favorite pair of sandals at home. Truth be told about me, if you catch me anytime between about the middle of May and the middle of September, and it's not Sunday morning, I am wearing one and only one pair of sandals. And I've had them forever. And they're a disaster, thank you. My wife just said they're yucky. But I love them. I suspect that you have a favorite kid. Are we supposed to admit that publicly? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. They're all your favorite. One of the downsides to losing so much weight, as I've done over the last 6 or 7 months, is you lose all your favorite stuff. Like the day I lost this. That is my Black Crowes tie-dyed shirt, limited edition, purchased from their website. And I tried everything to keep this shirt, right? You put it in the wash, it's super hot. And then you put it in the dryer, it's super hot. Yeah, I finally had to sell it on eBay. It's a shame. This is a series about RiverTree's favorite things. Our playlist, if you will. What you're going to hear about over the course of September are those things that define us, those things that we say together we want to care about the most. Or the word from that video that you just saw, our vision. What it is that captivates our collective soul and motivates us together as a church. Now, there are several reasons why it's important for us to talk about these favorite things periodically. Here's one very practical reason why. In any organization, in this case a church, it takes 3 and only 3 months to begin to drift away from the things that you say you care about the most if you don't talk about them or return to them. 3 months. And that's because we get distracted. We have a hard time remembering that the most important things aren't necessarily sometimes the most urgent things or the things that float to the top of the to-do list, right? You see that. Well, we're going to talk about our favorite things. The things that no matter what else is going on in the life of our church, no matter what issue we happen to be facing, these are the things that we say we will always care about the most. Period. They are our playlist. We start our discussion of RiverTree's favorite things with a familiar passage. These are Jesus' words late in his life as recorded in the Gospel of Matthew. And he says in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 22, in response to a question that he gets from a religious leader of his day. We're not sure if it was a sincere question. We're not sure if it was meant to trip Jesus up. But in any case, Jesus is asked, what's the most important part of the Bible? The way it reads in Matthew 22 is, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Everybody that day, 2,000 years ago, who heard Jesus reply would not have been surprised by that part of the response. Because they were Jews by faith. And Jews every week in their version of church called synagogue would say those words from Deuteronomy chapter 6 called the Shema. In fact, devout Jews would pray it every day, sometimes multiple times a day. So Jesus gets no points for the first part of his answer. And then he says, the second is like it. You will love your neighbor as yourself. And this is where Jesus takes a 90-degree turn. This is what's surprising about Jesus' answer. Because no religious leaders or teachers in Jesus' day had ever said that love your neighbor as yourself, which is a citation from the Old Testament, Leviticus chapter 19, was the second most important thing you could ever do in your life. Nobody had said it. This is a moment of spiritual creativity and novelty by Jesus. It had never been said or seen before. And Jesus finishes by saying, on these two simple commandments, these two single solitary sentences, the entire Bible hangs. The whole of the law and the prophets. This means that Jesus is also reinterpreting the Bible in a fresh, new way, an invigorating way. Do you see it? He just told you what your Bible's all about. He just told his audience that day what the Bible is all about. It is about two and only two things. It's about loving God fully, and it's about loving your neighbor as yourself. These are not unfamiliar verses to you if you call our church home. I'd like you to re-engage with the gravity, the weight, the significance and meaning of what Jesus says here. I'd like you to see it as an opportunity. Here's what I don't want you to do. I don't want you to think, oh gosh, we're talking about that again. Yes, we are. Because there are some stories and some things that are so important, you can't help but retell them. I don't want you to think, oh, this is another good Christian or moral idea, another nice idea in church that I heard from a well-meaning pastor, and I can take it or leave it. No, you're wrong. You can't. And we're going to get to that. This is not something that you can go, oh, my life will be really no different if I don't do it. My life will not be marginally or significantly better if I do it. I can take this or leave this. Of course you can. And there will be a great price to be won or paid either way from that decision. Because Jesus says the whole thing, the whole shebang is about these two things. And we're going to spend October, by the way, talking about the first great commandment. Today we're going to talk about the second. Here's a summary of what Jesus means in his response in Matthew 22 to that question. He means that there's almost nothing. The reason the almost is there is because there is a first great commandment. Otherwise, it wouldn't be. There's almost nothing more important in your life to your fulfillment and growth as a human being, and even to God himself, then you will love your neighbor the way that you look after yourself. Nothing. And if we don't treat that second great command the way that Jesus meant us to treat it, if we don't view it the way that Jesus meant us to view it, then we miss its absolute centrality to your happiness, to your relationship with God, to where you are in your life, where you've been, and where you're going. This is what Jesus meant that day. Can you begin to see the importance and the opportunity? For instance, I'm a pastor. I get to hear people ask a lot of really good questions, like, where's God in my life? I don't sense him right now. It seems like he's abandoned me, or he's distant. Or, what's God really care about? See, you could go to a dozen different churches this morning. And you could listen to a dozen people like me preach to you or teach you about a dozen different things. And you could leave those dozen churches thinking that I just got 12 things now that I have to do in order to be a good Christian, follow in Jesus' footsteps, or lead a meaningful life. No. There is a priority list in the Bible. There is a pecking order in the Bible. No. It is not all equal. Just because I have a favorite subject, or your favorite online pastor who you listen to periodically has a favorite topic, doesn't mean that's what God cares about the most. Here's what God cares about the most. Do you love Him fully, and do you love your neighbor as yourself? End of story. You want to know where to find God in your life? Start loving your neighbor. And all of a sudden, it's magic. God appears because you begin to do the thing that He said was most important to do as a human being or as someone trying to believe in Jesus. You see that? Wow. This is big. Well, bigger than that. What Jesus was doing that day is He was asking anyone who would listen to Him, who would trust Him, and who would give their life to do what He taught. He's saying to them, I need you to live wider than normal human nature would have you live. Like, you've experienced in your life the force, the whirlpool-like force of me and mine. You have your job. Your spouse may have a job. You have your kids. They have their schoolwork. They have their extracurricular activities. You have your extended family, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins. And what all that can be is a giant whirlpool sucking your attention inward to where the only thing in your life is me and mine. And Jesus says no. Human life and human fulfillment, being a good Christian, is not about me and mine. Of course you're not going to shortchange your wife. Of course you're going to be a good dad to your kids. But it's bigger than that. To catch the spirit of the entire Scripture, to hear Jesus for what He means and what He says, is to realize, as a Christian person, maybe more than anybody else in the world, past, present, or future, you believe that human life finds its greatest satisfaction not just in me and mine, but in you and yours. You are my neighbor. You are the person around me. You are the person I work with, the person close to me. And Jesus says, I will care for you and yours the way that I care for me and mine. And that, my friends, is revolutionary thinking. To most of us, to all of us. When you think of it that way, can you see how Jesus set the world on fire? And how His followers precipitated a change that the world has not seen before or since? We, if we follow Jesus, care a great deal. We care as much, in fact, about the you and yours of our neighbors as we do about me and mine. There is no other way to understand the second great commandment but that way. This also means you're going to have to rethink what you think about your own happiness, your own meaning or purpose in life, your own fulfillment and satisfaction. You live in a media-saturated country where there is far more information than you can ever consume. and there are 1,001 supposed experts selling you 1,001 ways that you can finally, ultimately, without question in your life, be happy, let me give you Jesus' answer. Love God fully, love your neighbor as yourself. And if you're not willing to do those two things, you won't be happy. Hey, that was easy. I should sell 1 million books. If you won't do the two most important things that your faith and your faith's book, the Bible, says, then don't think you can be happy any other way. That's not how it works. Jesus says in the Gospel of John about his own words that they are words of life. And that if you will just listen to and obey what he teaches, then you yourself will find life. And isn't that what all of us are looking for? Life. Just a taste of the good life. Jesus says, this is how you can have it. If you've grown up in church, or you've been had friends or family who are Christians, you've heard them say things like, Jesus saved me, or God has saved me through Jesus. Well, what's that mean? If we're not careful as Christians to explain what that means, then someone on the outside doesn't know. Of course it means that I believe in Jesus and I believe in God's grace, God's forgiveness, that I cannot deserve, but he is willing to shower upon me if I just say yes to him. Of course that's part of what it means. It means that I no longer have to fear death because Jesus rose from the dead, and someday because he did, and I trust in him, so will I. Yes, that's part of what it means. Let me tell you another major part of what it means. He saves you from what you were to who God wants you to be. He saves you from a former way of life to a future way of life. He saves you from the way everybody else does it to the way that Jesus says we ought to do it. If you will, he saves you from a me and mine world and instead gives you back a love your neighbor as yourself world. And that is as much your salvation as any other part of the Christian faith. In fact, it's a massive, major part of it. God is trying through Jesus to save every person in the room from a life that, even if we think we have good reasons for it, is far too self-absorbed, thinks it has too little to give to other people, or just doesn't have anything left to invest in someone else who isn't kin. And Jesus says, no, I'd like to free you. I'd like to rescue you. I'd like to release you from that. I'd like to bring you to a place where you realize that you can and will love your neighbor the same way that you look after yourself. Radical stuff that cannot help but take your life and shake it and change it if you simply believe it and commit to it as one of the two central pillars of your very life. Not just now, not just when you're doing church stuff, but on Monday morning, on Wednesday evening, on Saturday. This is what the Christian psychologist and writer David Benner says about the role of neighborly love in the life of a Christian. He writes that love is the acid test of Christian spirituality. If Christian conversion is actually authentic, then we are in a process of becoming more and more loving. And if we are not, as a Christian, becoming more and more loving, there's a problem. He continues, love reconnects us to life. The truth of Christ's life is that life is love and love is life. There is no genuine human life without love. Self-interest suffocates life. The only way to truly care for myself is, in the end, to give myself in love to my neighbors. Love is the fulfillment of everything that makes us human. The point of being human is to learn love. We are more or less human insofar as we are more or less willing to love. If we are more loving, we are more human. If we are less loving, we are less human, which means that some of the people you know aren't human at all, regardless of whether or not they're Homo sapien. Let's pause. I want to give you a chance to interact with this familiar subject that I hope maybe you've been able to reconnect to and reconsider afresh this morning. What I'd like you to do is to break up into some discussion groups. Now, guests, if you don't know anybody, the people around you are going to take care of you. You can identify yourself as guests, but the people around you will help you find their group and put you in their group. Also, don't feel any pressure to talk. You can just listen if you want. But for those of you who call RiverTree home, I want you to find the people that maybe you're in an adult group with, or the people you are friends with, or the people you're familiar with, and I'd like you to break up into little discussion groups. I'm going to have you do a couple of questions together to interact with what you just heard. Let me have your attention again. I want to point out a couple of things, and you probably noticed both, that we as a church are starting today as very tangible ways to help you as you try to be a love your neighbor kind of Christian. The first thing you probably noticed is over there by the leaflet stand. And this will be something that is permanent. It will be there every week. There is a table devoted to giving you different resources to actually love the people in your life already that we would call your neighbors. For instance, a couple of things that might not be familiar to you on that table. If you just think that there's somebody you know who might need a gracious, love your neighbor kind of church, but you're kind of freaked out to talk to them about it, you can get out the word anonymously with these nifty little door hangers that we did. And there are 3 different kinds. You can grab the one you like, put it on somebody's door, and be done. There's a couple other things over there that are brand new, like a lot of you have figured out how to use the Barnabas Project team and fund as a way of loving your neighbor. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, this is a significant part of our church's finances that we set aside to love our neighbors, and we give our people access to that fund, and our Barnabas Project team manages that fund. Maybe you know a friend or a coworker who needs financial help or practical help or access to some of the money in that fund. There's a card that looks like this. It's called Let Me Tell You About the Barnabas Project, and on the back it gives them all the pertinent details where they can request help from our Barnabas Project team, or you can help them do that. You can do it for them, all right? And then last, there are these. If you have a friend or a coworker who you think needs somebody to counsel with them or offer them some spiritual guidance, and you have no other choice, you can use me. Yeah, that was a joke. You can laugh. This is your way to make that opportunity known to or available to those friends or neighbors of yours. You can just give them one of these. This week it'll also live online at our website. And I would be happy to be that first person who steps in and helps a neighbor of yours. in their time of need or with their questions or whatever it might be. So be sure to use that table regularly. There's also, if you forget what all this stuff is, there's a sheet over there that explains it all. But then you also probably noticed when you sat down today a half sheet of paper called the Love Your Neighbor Challenge. And on the back, it describes for you what that challenge is. What I want you to know is that as the steering team of our church, kind of the spiritual leaders who are trying to watch out for the whole thing, where it is and where it's going, as they talked and prayed together over the last 3 or 4 months, this is really what they landed on. They landed on wanting to focus on this more and more. They think that this is not just the present, but the future of the church. That's why it's on your chairs today. So it doesn't even just come from me. It comes from that group of 5 people. And as you'll read on the back, there are some specific things that it asks you to do. But as I heard some of these groups right up here close to me talking about, so much of being a love your neighbor kind of Christian is small. It is actually rarely about big stuff or big amounts of money. It actually starts small and daily. It just starts with you being aware of the people around you, how they sound, how they look, what you overhear. It starts with you being mindful of every word you say to every person you come in contact with, and using the power of your words to love those people. It's as small as you choosing to be encouraging, not critical or negative. It's you choosing to be patient, not impatient like everybody else. It's you choosing to do those things that we most associate with that word, L-O-V-E, love. And you'll find on the back, it's also being committed to praying about your neighbors and being a love your neighbor kind of person. Because what you pray about, you become. So we as a church want to pray about these things. Let me tell you what success looks like for the church that you call home. Let me tell you what the future of RiverTree looks like. It looks like you being committed to loving your neighbors. Because I don't know your neighbors, nor does the person next to you. But God has them in your life, your friends, your coworkers, the parents of your kids, of kids that your kids go to school with, all that stuff. You know those people. I don't. And you may be the only Christian in their life who takes the second great commandment as seriously as it ought to be. And you are there to love them in a way that maybe nobody else will. That's what this church is. That's what it will become, more and more. I want you to take a moment and grab that card if you have one close to you. And I want to give you a second in the quiet to just personally, privately, start that prayer conversation with God about what's on the back of that card. So work your way through the different points there and pray about each one of them. And sincerely ask God to give you the chance to do these things and be these things to the people around you. And then we'll move on to something else in a second.